My guest today is Jon Clark, an Emmy Award winning writer and director who makes elevated sci fi films with timely social commentary. Now, his short film Blind Spot was an official selection at Nightmares Film Festival, North Hollywood Cinefest, as well as Screamfest New Orleans, and so many more. But his newest short film, Love Machine, has had its world premiere at Fantasia Film Festival and just premiered at the Academy qualifying Hollyshorts Film Festival. And Love Machine is our discussion for today. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Emmy Award winning filmmaker Jon Clark and his short film, Love Machine, to the show. Welcome, Jon.
Thanks, Ward. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Now, wow. All I can say is this brand new film of yours really opens up a big can of worms. And we're going to get to that in a moment. But what led you into filmmaking and what well, was there a particular film that inspired you to be a filmmaker?
That's a good question. So I wasn't one of those kids who grew up always knowing they wanted to make films. I grew up in a really small rural town in northern Michigan, and it didn't seem like a possibility. I didn't know anyone who made films. But then I went to college, and I studied under a director from Chicago, Anthony Colmati, who's a really talented filmmaker, and it started to open up my mind to the idea of doing this, professionally. So that was kind of how I found my path. I made a bunch of really terrible student films before I ever made anything worth watching. Um, and in terms of an early film that sparked interest, I think the first movie I remember seeing in theaters was the Phantom Menace, the Star Wars prequel, and mixed reviews I think on how people feel about that movie, but I remember it being like really awe inspiring because I saw it in a huge theater, and it was just kind of this massive blockbuster that at a young age really struck me of sort of the immensity of the cinema experience. So
Well,
yeah.
you're in Detroit, not
Hmm.
exactly what we would call a mecca for film. Uh,
Right.
how were you able to become a filmmaker? I mean, did you make the journey to LA like so many others do?
Yeah, so I've never lived in LA. I've visited several times, but my journey kind of started in advertising. I worked on commercials for Ford Motor Company. That's a big part of the industry here in Detroit. A lot of advertising, a lot of car commercials because we're the Motor City. And I make a living working on videos for small businesses, government PSAs, things like that. And then I've also tried to kind of nurture this filmmaking career, making short films when I can. And it's interesting. All the people who work on my films also, make a living on commercials in Detroit. So, our cinematographer, our G&E team, our sound mixer, they're all professionals who are mostly making commercials. But I think there's a strong desire to make films here. And for a while, we had a tax incentive in Michigan back in like 2008 to 2012 ish, and then it was repealed. So there was a time where a lot of films were made here, a lot of big films, Batman versus Superman, one of the Transformers movies. Ryan Gosling directed a movie in Detroit, and it was kind of a hub. And then the incentives left, and unfortunately, a lot of people moved to LA and Atlanta to find work. And there are some of us who are still here, and yeah, I think it's a small community, but it's tight knit, and we rely on each other a lot. And we've got some good people here who are interested in making films.
Well, you have a very interesting film now with Love Machine. And as I said before, you really open up a whole can of worms because the subject matter is AI. So,
Hmm.
why did you want to explore the topic of AI in the relationship to human interaction?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I wrote the original draft of the film before ChatGPT existed, so it was kind of it became a whole nother thing in the last year or so, right? And originally it was I love films like Blade Runner and Ex Machina and some of these classic like AI movies, but they're all similar in the fact that like it's kind of gloom and doom about how AIs are going to kill us all, which maybe they will. I don't know, but I wanted to make something that had some humor to it and kind of just showed how absurd it would be to like sort of live among creatures that look and act like people but aren't people, and sort of try and ask what the difference is there, and if we will maybe we'll get to a point where it is indistinguishable and we can't tell, and what does that mean, and what would that be like, and specifically what would it be like going on a date and then finding out that someone's an AI, and kind of the chaos that ensues.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of a a futuristic version. Not quite the futuristic version of the Crying Game, but yeah, there would be some surprises.
Right, exactly. No,
Well,
totally.
you know, just the other day, some guy traveled halfway across the country because he had a crush on an AI version of Kendall Jenner and he thought it was real. So, and I had just watched your film and I'm like,
Hmm.
wow, because what amazes me is people send me memes from Instagram and think that the video is true. And I'm
Hmm.
like, and I'm typing back going, you do know this is AI, right? And
Hmm.
but society is very slow to see what is AI versus what is real, or is AI slowly morphing into the stage where we may not know the difference?
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. I think we're entering, unprecedented times where we're gonna have to figure out what its role is in our future, and I think it will be important to draw a distinction between what's AI generated and what's, human generated, because, now we're getting to a place where there's generative AI video where you can type in a prompt and create video, and as someone who makes a living making videos for people, it makes me nervous that like someday might just be replaced with generative video. So yeah, it's really, it is a cautionary tale. I think, our film is obviously like a little further in the future where like an AI is more like a person, but in the immediate future, as a filmmaker, it's nerve wracking, especially with people wanting to use AI to write scripts and kind of like generate, original content. I would prefer to see AI do things like remove plastic from the ocean instead of like write movies.
Yeah, yeah. I completely agree. And I recently had a conversation about AI with another filmmaker, and she said, and we both agreed that let's say somebody uses Chat GPT, you know, by reading it, like let's say it was a paragraph about something.
Mhm.
There, there's this there's this element with Chat that if you're smart enough, you can pick it up and notice that it's completely written by AI because it lacks a little bit of emotion, or the emotion is really flat.
Right.
And we both agreed that AI has no place in the areas of script writing because we need to keep film as human as possible. I mean, even if you
Yeah.
watch The Matrix, there's still a big human element within that whole
Hmm.
film. And so I think we're entering a dangerous territory, but there was something that I found kind of funny in your film. So, because when the term robot came up,
Hmm.
robot was a racist slur. And I got it, and immediately it took me back to the Oscar winning short film of this year, which was called I'm Not a Robot.
Right.
And it shows that AI is going to have feelings, and that I find that just as dangerous as the visuals of AI. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do agree, and I thought like how scary would it be if AI was sort of co-opting these terms that humans have used in their own civil rights movements, and then trying to be, to claim that they were the same as people, and they, deserved like equal footing, right? So that, yeah, that was sort of where that came. And actually, I don't know if anyone will believe this, but I did write that before I saw I Am Not a Robot. And then I saw the film and I was like, oh, everyone's going to think we just ripped this off. But I love that film. It was great. It totally deserved the Oscar. It was very,
Oh no,
of
I
the
didn't
time.
think you pulled from that film at all when I saw yours, because in I'm Not a Robot, now of course everybody is still 50-50, is she or isn't she? But it still begs the question. And we're now blurring, but I don't know if we're to the point of blurring the lines. We are in artificial creation, but
Right.
not to the point of where, we see all of the videos on Instagram of these robotic companies building some very scary stuff, but they're
Yeah.
still not to the point to where we can't tell the difference.
Totally. Yeah, I think hopefully we have a ways to go before that's the case. But yeah, I agree. It's scary, unprecedented times, and I think it's going to be up to us as folks in the film industry and other industries to try and wade through this, and draw a really clear distinction between what's AI made and what's human made, because there are always going to be people who are just going to try and push the technology as far as they can,
Yeah, I'm finding filmmakers. There are some filmmakers that are wanting to push the envelope.
hmm
I get it.
hmm
But we are going to get into a very, very strong tug of war in the film industry. And right
hmm
now, I don't think the unions are doing enough to protect. And technology, as we all know, has the tendency to push and overrun everything in its path.
hmm Yeah, totally. No, I agree. I hope the unions and everyone else steps up and says, like, listen, we're gonna draw some lines in the sand of what's not acceptable in terms of AI replacing human labor and talent and creativity. And it's also an economic thing. It's like, we don't want our jobs to all be replaced, right? And I think a lot of people think, well, I'll kind of be like a steward of the AI, and my job will be to be like help the AI. And I'm like, well, it might get to, if you continue using it, it's only going to continue learning, and then eventually it's not going to need you, and and then what are we going to do? I don't know.
Well, you just brought up my next question. One of the scariest scenarios in your film, if you could touch and communicate to an AI, such as the one that Claire Cooney plays, AI is usually programmed to outsmart a human.
Right.
So when I watch that scene, I mean, getting into an argument, and let's say this whole scenario of this film is completely real in 2025. Getting
hmm
into an argument with an AI, would be impossible to win, and I felt that in your film. Then I thought of something, and I don't know if this is a correct comparison, but when Stephen King's The Lawnmower Man came out, he kept getting smarter and smarter and smarter and smarter.
hmm
I think when it was John Travolta in Phenomenon, he kept getting smarter. Of course, he was human, and
hmm
but kept getting smarter and smarter and smarter. That's a big danger, because humans, they have to put effort forward to become smart, but it's not just being book smart. You have to have wisdom
hmm
integrated into what you know and learn and gain and understand. But AI, it almost gets to the point to where it crosses a line and becomes a weapon against humanity.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Right. Yeah. It's just got this exponential growth factor that people don't. And yeah, thanks for picking up on that in the film. I think we sort, maybe not thinking of it in quite those terms, but we were thinking like, how can she, try and win this argument and prove a point, and how are we going to escalate those stakes? So the verbal argument's not working on Bethany's character, Veronica the human. So she's going to take it to this physical place, and she does this kind of odd dance sequence, which is meant to be a little uncomfortable, but also a little bit scary. And then yeah, she ultimately fakes being like falling over because it was part of the human's argument about how there was this glitch in AIs a couple years ago, and they were all like falling over. She kind of compared it to people having a heart attack, and so she was sort of mocking her, I think, and tempting her to be like, to question if it was real or not. And at the end, she opens her eyes, so she
Yeah.
messing up. Yeah.
When Claire was playing that part, because I had to keep watching the film over and over again because her part is really dangerous.
Hmm.
Um, when when she did the dance,
Hmm.
it was uncomfortable, but I also found her, and it took me forever to figure out her personality, and the only word that I could come up with her personality was toxic.
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely.
You know
I
what I
mean,
mean?
I think that's accurate. What I was telling the actresses was that, um, this is a character who you're not sure if you should be laughing with them or flinching, and I find that sort of that gray area really interesting. There was this film that Mark Duplass made a few years ago called Creep. That was a horror movie, but the first half of the movie, he plays this character who you're like, he's so over the top that it's like very funny, but also extremely sinister. And then it ends up taking a pretty dark turn. But I was thinking a lot about that sort of in between. I mean, those are some of my favorite type of movies where you're just like, what is going on with this person? And it's sort of like, going on a date, you open yourself up to these unknowns, right? So in real life, Claire Cooney and I are actually engaged now. We're partners, and but before we met, we both went on a lot of first dates, and we were always talking about how you never really knew what you were going to get, and sometimes people would thread this line of being like, kind of being sweet and then being passive aggressive, and then kind of this back and forth and this seesaw. And so we kind of wanted to just see how far we could take that uncomfortable factor. Yeah.
Yeah, and you did. I mean, because when the whole conversation starts out playful and trying to learn about one another, and then it makes this slow turn because of the backstory.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
and I was so impressed because you put a lot of thought into the storyline. Because
Hmm.
in reality, if AIs were real, that we could touch, talk, you could hold their hand, their backstories are all programmed,
Right.
which then becomes a very major problem because are all of their backstories going to be now her backstory? She kind of, that's what's weird about her backstory though in this film.
Hmm.
She used it. I don't want to say she used it as a weapon, but she used it to think she could gain sympathy in a way, but she was still passive aggressive, but more on the aggressive side. And so when I got to thinking about it, I said, okay, if this whole thing was, I mean, absolutely real,
Hmm.
somebody has to create the backstories.
Right.
So,
Right.
and then you're playing on the mind and the emotions of the human.
Yeah, no, no, absolutely. So, I think I intentionally set it up to be unclear if she's lying about that, right? Because there is an implication that maybe there was like prejudice towards AI. So like her story about getting like mocked and beaten up could be true, or she could be totally fabricating it, and like you said, in order to gain sympathy and sort of ingratiate herself in like this kind of sinister way. So yeah, I don't know if I know like definitively if she was lying or not, but I do think she was trying to be manipulative in one way or another. Yeah,
Well,
and that that idea of backstory is kind of explored in like Blade Runner 2049 as well, because the Ryan Gosling's character in that movie has this memory, this core memory from his childhood, and then he finds out that all of the replicants have the same memory. So I was sort of drawing some inspiration from that.
uh, you know, I really love this film because there's so much that you bring forth that we really, really have to think about in the terms of the future. And because I was sitting there watching the film a few times, I'm like, okay, if I was the human in this scenario, you're never going to win an argument. Which I kind of laughed because I was like, two women kind of get into an argument, but who actually wins?
Right.
When we talk about a man and a woman in an argument, you're like, dude, just shut up. But the joke is if two women argue, who actually wins? But
Hmm.
yeah, but in this one, there was a bit of this spiritual tug of war going on.
Hmm.
And I felt sorry for the human one because no matter what would happen, she was going to lose.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because of the way we know how AI is programmed,
Hmm.
and because it was like, I think it was Elon Musk that said it about a month ago when he was creating his program. He said the problem with chat is it's already programmed full of information pulled from millions of sources. So you're not really getting anything new.
Right.
You're just
Right.
putting it in a way that you could try to claim it as your own, but really you're stealing copyrights. Yeah, that's how I look at it. And
Hmm.
but yeah, your film, I mean, pushes the envelope from the human standpoint, which I loved. But it's scary because I always wondered that if an AI person like you depicted in your film, if they were more prone to anger like Kayla was, because she seemed really offended quickly, wouldn't let
Hmm.
it go. And I
Hmm.
was like, she's kind of a bitch.
Hmm. She is. I mean, she's very aggressive, and we talked about the idea of her being so like her AI being so advanced that it's kind of only like, I mean, it's a more extreme degree than a person, but like only people can like be that like strange and passive aggressive. It's like this heightened version of like like a person. Like she was like programmed so well that it's like gone to this new level of passive aggressiveness, right? And it was like important too that it wasn't she wasn't gonna like kill her or anything, I didn't want it to be like a horror film, but just like, yeah, just the most just the worst date you could ever imagine.
Well,
And
yeah, I mean, because it's kind of funny because Kayla becomes what I would call the high maintenance girlfriend. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
right.
Like
Yeah,
way, I mean, so high maintenance that most guys would be scared.
sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it definitely, the goal is definitely to scare Veronica, the human, and we were also trying to make it so, you kind of touched on it earlier. Both of their arguments are somewhat compelling, and even though, yeah, I mean, yes, it's clearly like the AI is messing with her at the end. There's also this element of like, leaving the audience kind of to wrestle with these questions on their own. It's only a 12-minute film. I also don't have all the answers to like the solutions of AI in the future. So yeah, we just kind of wanted to probe the questions, make people laugh, make people think about it, and then leave them kind of pondering.
Yeah, I thought it was funny that Kayla pulls a race card.
Yeah, yeah, no, I know. I mean, and I think that if AIs do get advanced enough, they will, like you said, they're a compilation of everything that you can find right on the internet. So they would try and weaponize like real language from human movements, and that's kind of a creepy thing to think about
Yeah.
because
So, well, see, you premiered at Fantasia. You also
Mhm.
premiered at Hollyshorts. What
Mhm.
has been the reaction to your film? Because a film with AI as a storyline, I mean, that very thing is worrying the whole film industry.
Yeah. So Fantasia, we had a really warm reaction. The audiences there are great. They're like, I've never seen so many people just excited to see like weird genre movies. It was awesome. It was a packed house, a line around the block, and people responded really well. Holly Shorts also was a good reception, but I will say like people seem mixed on like the AI topic in Hollywood. I could tell like talking to some people, a lot of people agreed with what we were saying that AI doesn't really have a place in art, and then a lot of like some other people seemed a little more like pro AI, and it was interesting. Like during the Q&A, I mentioned that I don't think writers and filmmakers should be really promoting AI, and I'd say about like half the audience responded well to that, and the other half just kind of looked at me. So it's controversial. It's I think it's here whether we like it or not. It's just a matter of if we're going to be responsible with it.
You know, you you bring up a great point because Hollywood is a complete mixed bag.
Hmm.
And when I hear filmmakers wanting to push AI, and I don't want this to come out wrong, but it'll come out wrong no matter what. Can you really call yourself a creative if everything you're doing is coming from AI? Because you're just
Yeah,
typing in
I agree.
words. I mean, does
Right.
does that make you creative? I don't think so.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think so either. And I think unfortunately people, since we're in this digital age, I think people see it just as like another tool in the toolbox or something, but it's just not. It's different than, the switching from typewriters to computers or switching from the library to the internet. It's not the same, right? And as you mentioned earlier, it is like copyright infringement, and the laws just aren't keeping up with the fact that it's basically stealing from millions of different source material. So but I do think you made a good point earlier that when people write things with ChatGPT or forms of AI, you can tell something's off. You're like, this doesn't sound right. It's like kind of this elevated quasi professional like language, and you're like, okay, like yeah, it just sounds. It's like this uncanny valley syndrome, right? Where it's just not quite human.
It's almost like it's too perfect, but it's still not perfect.
Right. Right. It's a lot of like it's like corporate buzzword kind of like it's like when like everyone's talking about synergy, that's how it feels like. It's like every chat GPT thing is like synergy and like organizational strategy and stuff. And I'm just like, I don't know what this is. It's
What?
not how people
Well, here's the funny part. I'm not going to say funny. That's not the right word. The interesting part. Excuse me here. Mm. Okay. So it was either earlier this year, Tyler Perry stopped his planned $800 million expansion
Hmm.
for sound stages
Mhm.
because he was like, I got to stop because where's this AI thing going?
Mhm.
Because the first thought was, we're going to use AI to create our sets,
Mhm.
but we're still going to have actors. So that way,
Mhm.
we're not going to have to spend millions of dollars in set construction, which then
Mhm.
puts carpenters out of business, puts
Right.
electricians out of business, puts plumbers out of business,
Mhm.
landscapers out of business.
Right.
So he stops. Now, Within the last 60 days, Taylor Sheridan ends up with what, a $400 million investment in Texas for sound
Hmm.
stages.
Hmm.
Georgia, Marvel basically has sound stages that are empty because they've packed up and moved
Hmm.
everything to the UK because
Hmm.
labor's cheaper.
Hmm.
Netflix has built a $110 million facility in New Mexico, and others are thinking. So, not everybody is believing that AI is taking over because there's too much money being spent on the
Hmm.
organic side of the film industry that we know and love. But then
Right.
you have people like Tyler Perry that's kind of holding back, going, wait a minute,
Hmm.
because he spends a ton of money, but he also knows, excuse me, he also knows how to budget what, when
Yeah.
a studio gives him a project to do, he knows
Hmm.
how to work with a low budget and pull the most out of it. So
Right.
I understand his side when it comes to income and economics, but
Hmm.
yeah, we are in a gray area right now.
I know. Yeah, it's really a lot of uncertainty, and yeah, I'm hopeful that we'll kind of right the ship and steer it in the right direction, and we'll be able to maintain everyone's jobs. Because yeah, that is the thing I think I'm most concerned about is people being put out of work, and also I don't think it's going to do as good of a job as like a real set will do. I think you'll be able to tell the difference between like an AI generated set and like a real practical set on a sound stage. So. Um, yeah, and it's also just I think kind of determining what kind of world we want to live in. Do we want to let the machines do all the thinking for us? I don't, because that's the other thing people aren't talking about is like even if you want to say it's the most efficient and the best product possible, which I don't think it is, but even if you want to take that train of thinking, it's it's kind of outsourcing our ability to think. It's like, and that can't lead to good things
Well,
for
no,
the
and that's
human.
and that's what they've been talking about. That though the research has proven that those that use Chat GPT, there's a
Hmm.
part of their brain that shuts off.
Hmm.
And there, somebody asked me the other day, have you ever used it? I said, yeah, I've used it twice
Hmm.
out of curiosity. And it
Right.
wasn't to build a graphic or a picture. And it was basically you type in a sentence to see what comes up. And then
Right.
I'm just like, I would rather write my own,
Right. Agreed.
because
Yeah.
I know, a lot of writers know that our own thought and personality is within the words that we write. There is a certain style. Now, there are professional authors, or I should say professional ghostwriters. And let's say you work with one of those, and the first thing they will ask is, what type of writing style are you wanting out of this?
Hmm.
And then because they know, because they've done this for so long, they've studied writing, they know how to create a writing style. AI does not know how to do that.
Hmm. No, I totally agree. Yeah, I don't think it's just an amalgamation of what on the internet says is good writing, and I don't think that's going to be the same as actual good writing.
No, I have the perfect example. So yesterday I was on Instagram, and there was a an upcoming film project from someone, and they had put out and said, "Hey, we are looking for someone that knows how to write in the correct language of the English in the 16th and 17th century."
Mm-hmm.
AI can't do that.
Right. No, totally. Yeah, I agree. I think and I think hopefully soon we'll start to see the limitations of it. I don't know. It's yeah,
Yeah, well,
scary times.
well, I have one last question on Love Machine.
Mhm.
Um, and I love the element. I love the element. And ladies and gentlemen, there's a reason why I'm wearing blue and hot magenta. So when you see Love Machine, you're going to know why. Uh, who came up with the whole lighting effect?
Yeah, so that was collaboration between me, our director of photography, Noah Elliott Morrison, and our gaffer, Jake Gottman, who those guys are really, really talented. And, we talked about wanting to give it this futuristic look, but we didn't have the budget for visual effects or to really do anything too elaborate. So we determined like the best way would be to do neon, right? That's kind of like the cyberpunk look of the future in video games and films, and so we also hired a local artist to make the neon strips you see on the wall. So those are just like pure neon strips, and then Noah and Jake lit the room with RGB aperture lights, that they could dial in to match the exact color on the neon bars. And then we had a bunch of lights positioned throughout the apartment. And the apartment was our production designers, Hannah Kings, who did a great job, like making sure that the lights looked good on the walls and they were like super, super fragile, like, cause it's just neon. There's no casing around them. So we actually like broke a couple trying to mount them. But we had extras, and yeah, the whole team did a really good job kind of dialing in that look. We did a few tests before we shot to make sure we could get it right. But yeah, that was the kind of the low budget version of trying to make it look like the future.
Yeah, but it worked. I mean, was there much changes that you had to do in post when it came to colorization?
It was really just kind of matching everything and dialing in a look. We had a great colorist, Jeff Altman, out of Chicago, who's a really talented guy who helped enhance all the kind of the pink and magentas in the image that we had. Like a little, like the original image was maybe a little more balanced between the blue and the pink, and then we had him steer kind of into the warm pink tones to accent the love of it all. So yeah, I was really, really pleased by what the team was able to pull off. They're all really talented, professionals. So it helped elevate the film.
Well, I I love the film, John. And are you already slated for other film festivals coming up?
Yeah, we have one this weekend. Sidewalk Film Festival in Birmingham, Alabama is a cool festival that we're playing at this Saturday, and then we're playing Charlotte Film Festival in North Carolina and Lake County in the greater Chicago area. And fingers crossed for more to come. We're still waiting to hear from a bunch. So yeah, we'd love to get it out there as much as possible.
Well, I love the film again. And ladies and gentlemen, Jon Clark's short film Love Machine brings the whole AI element to the forefront. Even though we are experiencing AI only on video and still photos, what if AI became 3D where we can talk to them, touch them, interact with them as if they were a race of people? Now, what if we can't tell the difference? AI is a very hot topic in the world of creatives when it comes to art, music, and yes, film. Should we worry about it? Will those who create with AI remove those who organically create, like John and myself? Well, many questions and no real answers. But Jon Clark's film Love Machine creates so many new storylines. And what if a feature film was created two ways? One with real actors portraying AI, and or the whole film is AI? Something to ponder. So, John, again, thank you so much for sharing this film with me today.
Thank you so much, Ward. I really appreciate your time and your questions. It was a great conversation.
Hey, thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, hey, you can catch all of the Bond on Cinema interviews at bondoncinema.com. Check out our Prime show, our YouTube channel, and yes, you can listen to us on Spotify, iTunes, Audible, and more. And remember, you'll see the real me at the movies or from the red carpet.